Three True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher, and we've got a lot to get into across the world of college basketball from the past week and beyond a little bit. We're just going to talk about some bigger picture issues right now. In the first segment, we're going to go to the SEC. We're going to talk about what is the strength of this conference right now, because I think it's a really interesting question. We've heard, particularly the SEC media, the guys who are calling the games. Jimmy Dykes, I know, has been pressing this for weeks and weeks, saying that the SEC is the best conference in college basketball this season. Now, if you made the case overall, I think you could say, yeah, like it's them in the Big 12. Infrastructure-wise, they've come a long way. But this season, it seems like a stretch. So we'll get into what is the case for that. And also, what do we do with all of these SEC teams hovering around the right side of the bubble? Can they all stay there? Is the strength of that conference enough to make sure all of these teams actually cross the finish line and end up in the NCAA tournament? We'll discuss that. Then on the other side, in the second segment, we're going to talk about two teams that I think are not getting enough love from bracketologists. Teams that I think, I understand the hesitance. I understand why they would be a little bit lower than where maybe the algorithms, the numbers, all of that would put them if we were just going based off of the numbers. If we were just going off of data, I understand these two teams, why they would be a little bit below that. But they seem to be well below where the numbers suggest they are, and really where the resume suggests they should be. And I think that's in large part due to perception of the team and perception of what they did earlier in the season, beyond maybe even a couple months ago. So we'll get into that in the second segment. Of course, as always, in the third segment, we're going to get you the games of the week and get you out of here ready for another college basketball slate, full 7 days of games to watch before we come back here next week and do this all again. So as we get into this, as we talk about it, the SEC, up at the top of the conference, you've got Alabama, you've got Tennessee, you've got Auburn, some really good teams. South Carolina has made their way up into that. Very interesting development there. They have been incredible. They continue to prove themselves every time they are given an opportunity, and they look the part of a real NCAA tournament basketball team. So we talk about the top of the conference. It's about as good as it gets, especially if we talk about those three teams. Tennessee looks like a Final Four contender. Alabama looks like a Final Four contender. Auburn, they've started to pick up those wins. I know the big question for them was, can they win those big games? Now we know they can win them at home. I mean, they ran Alabama out. They really put on a show there. But we also saw them play at Alabama, and it was just as ugly the other direction. So what does that mean for them? Can they go win on a neutral floor? Do they struggle on the road? I think the SEC tournament will be our biggest test of that theory. Of course, they'll also have road games along the way in the SEC to help prove that as well. And so I think as you look at the top of this conference, it really is strong, about as strong as you can be. So if you want to make the case that the top of this conference is the best there is, I get it. Okay, because Houston's number one in the net rankings, but then we go down, there's not another Big 12 team until BYU at 8. Before you get to BYU at 8, you get Alabama at 5, Tennessee at 6, and Auburn at 7. All right, so they are, in terms of how they're playing, how the computers view them, those three are as good as anybody that can match up with any other conference's top three teams any day of the week. So yes, the SEC has great strength. They have really good basketball teams, but then there's quite a bit of a drop-off to number 4, where Kentucky is number 25 and has been slipping over recent weeks. They have not performed well. 3 straight home losses in Rupp Arena. First time in Rupp Arena, first time since the 60s for the program. That was pre-Rupp. I mean, what is going on at Kentucky? That's a whole different discussion. Calipari seems to be back on the hot seat. Last year, we talked about this was the year. It looked like things were going pretty well. Yes, they had a young roster. Yes, they had some defensive issues to figure out, but the offense was clicking. They were dominant at home like they always are. It looked like, okay, maybe this isn't a title contender right now, but they've got the pieces. They've got upward trajectory, places to go. The ceiling was nowhere near where they were. Instead, they've gone downhill since then, it appears. They've really struggled recently to kind of find a cohesive way to play basketball. It's been a problem for them, and they are running out of time to fix that if they want to bring a real contender into the NCAA tournament. So Kentucky sliding down the board. I even saw yesterday some Kentucky fans concerned about whether they can, I guess, where their resume is right now. I mean, it's an NCAA tournament lock. There's no concern there. For them to fall out of the NCAA tournament picture, I really do believe, as I pull up quickly the remainder of their schedule, they only have 1 quad 3 and 1 quad 4 game left on the schedule. Both of those at home against Arkansas and Vanderbilt. Okay, that Vanderbilt game, I just don't see Vanderbilt winning in Rupp Arena. All right, so if we get to that point, we can have this conversation again. We can talk it through. But other than that, it's 4 quad 1 opportunities and 2 quad 2 games. All right, so if they can pick up just 1 or 2 wins out of that, I think their resume stabilizes enough to get them in the field, particularly with the wins that they already have on the resume. 2 quad 1 wins already in the books. One of them against North Carolina, who is in the hunt for a 1 seed right now. So that's a big one for the Wildcats to have under their belt. I think Kentucky is okay right now. I think in terms of the NCAA tournament picture, in terms of the trajectory of the team, in terms of what's going on there between the fan base and Calipari, there's a lot of problems. I'm not trying to tell you that the program is just cruising along, going to be fine. Everyone stop worrying about this. You can worry all you want, but don't worry about the NCAA tournament yet. Like that's not in the realm at this point. It could come up if this skid gets even worse than it has, but I'm not overly worried about that happening. We just haven't seen that really, barring major catastrophic injuries. We have not seen a Calipari team tank in that way at any point during his tenure at Kentucky. So if we move past Kentucky, then we get into a group that includes Texas A&M, Florida, and Mississippi State, all in the 30s of the net rankings. Now, all of those teams have good wins. They all have some questionable losses, but they all have resumes that seem to say, yeah, that's an NCAA tournament team. But we've also seen all 3 of them at different points in the season plummet towards the bubble. Because one bad run of games, especially if you drop a quad 3 in that process, and it really changes the numbers for these teams that are all bunched up really closely. I mean, the teams between 30 and 45 are pretty close together if we're talking about the overall computer numbers. So what do you do with Texas A&M, who has shown good and bad, and they've had real bad struggles when they're down. They've looked really good when they're up. Mississippi State, a team that seemed to be kind of just chugging along. They have some ups, they have some downs, but what is it that they bring that makes them a lock for the NCAA tournament? You know, with that Texas A&M team, what is it that team shows you that you say, yes, for sure an NCAA tournament team? I mean, is it Wade Taylor? Like Wade Taylor, yes, great basketball player. But I don't know if Wade Taylor shows me enough that I'm like, man, like I think of when I think about this and how a player can impact, one player can impact a team's NCAA tournament kind of conversation. I think back to Ben Simmons at LSU. It felt like that entire season, yeah, LSU struggles. Yeah, LSU drops games that they shouldn't be dropping. Yeah, the team around him is not that good. Like they're just not a lot of chemistry, but they've got Ben Simmons. they're going to put them in the NCAA tournament. That's what it felt like the whole time leading up to that tournament. None of these three teams have some kind of player like that you just feel like, yeah, if they have the choice of putting him in the field or leaving him out, they're going to want him in. There's just not that kind of feeling around this team. And I think that it is going to become an interesting conversation because all three of these teams can't make deep SEC tournament runs if those top teams are playing at the capability that they can. I mean, we've already got 4 teams ahead of them. That means somebody's going to have to pull off an upset just to get into the semifinals. So what does that mean for these teams that could slip the wrong direction on the bubble? Then we get into the 2 most interesting. We're going to talk about these a little bit more in depth because I think that their resumes throughout the season probably say, yes, NCAA tournament team. In fact, I think South Carolina is moving closer to the 5 seed line than the 10 seed line at this point. Like, they are upward trajectory. They don't drop games. They're 21-3 overall. It's hard to take a 21-3 team in a power conference whose strength of record this season ranks in the top 10 in the NCAA and then just say, they're, on the bubble. But if you look purely at net rankings, and I know that's not how we do this, that's not how bracketologists look at it. You look at resume, you look at big wins, bad losses, the quadrants, you look at a combination of computer data, you look at all kinds of things that go into this. Healthy players, injured players, all of it. But South Carolina in the net is only ranked 45th right now. 45. It seems strangely low for a team that is 21-3 and playing seemingly as good as they are. They've got good wins. So something in this computer data is bringing them down. It's very interesting to kind of look at their resume. Yes, they have a quad 3 loss, but they're also 3-2 in quad 1 and 5-0 in quad 2. So they have performed incredibly well. 8-2 in the first 2 quadrants is something that a lot of the top teams looking for 1 and 2 seeds have on their resume. Their one bad loss came against Georgia, of course. And, if we talked about eliminating that game, I think we're talking about a whole different realm with the South Carolina team where they could be in bracketology, where they could land in the NCAA tournament come March. But I think that they've got more opportunities to cement themselves here. Obviously, with Auburn coming up, they've got Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Florida, Tennessee, and Mississippi State all left on the schedule. All these teams that I just mentioned above them, they've got just about all of them left. Well, here's the danger. If your computer numbers are that low, that is to suggest that maybe you are the underdog in a lot of these games. Regardless of your record, regardless of what you've accomplished, who you've beaten. That's what the computers are telling you. So let's play what if here. And this team that's 21-3, the darling of everybody, they look the part. They're almost top 10 in the country in the AP poll. What happens if they go on a losing skid here to really good teams, to NCAA tournament teams? What do we do with that? Because the numbers say that they're already closer to the bubble than not. How many losses do they have to take before they're on the wrong side of the bubble? That's what I think is interesting with this South Carolina team, because it feels like they should be in the realm of NCAA tournament locks at this point. Like, maybe not locks, but in the field. Like, when we talk about the bubble watch stuff, it's locks. Then you've got in the field, they're comfortable. All they have to do is not screw up. And then you've got kind of your on the bubble teams, and then they've got work to do to get up into that conversation. I feel like South Carolina is at least in that second category in the field. Just don't screw up. But when your schedule looks that tough ahead, well, what does screw up mean? Because if screwing up means that you drop games to Texas A&M on the road, Tennessee at home, and Mississippi State on the road, maybe even Auburn on the road too. Well, if none of those, if I said that game went that direction, you would be like, oh my God, what, South Carolina lost that? In fact, I would assume that they're probably not going to be favorites in at least 3 of those games I just mentioned. So what do we do? Can they really fall out of the tournament at this point with how well they've performed so far? I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with that South Carolina team. And then Ole Miss, the other team, started on this incredible undefeated run. They really were just humming along. There's still no losses in quad 3 or quad 4. I mean, that's what you're looking for on these resumes. When you start getting towards the bubble, you say, all right, anyone that has bad losses, we're going to set over here. Anyone who has only lost to really good teams, okay, like we get it. You lost to really good teams. That's where Ole Miss is. They're also 5-5 in quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities. Of course, they started the season with win after win after win. I mean, they've got, I guess the one loss that you could say, hey, that was a bad one, probably LSU on the road, but they weren't even favorites in that game. Other than that, it's Tennessee, it's Auburn twice, and on the road against South Carolina. This Ole Miss team has not just dropped opportunities. They've lost in quad 1 to really good opponents. So what do we do with this Ole Miss team whose computer numbers have never cracked the top 50 in the net? At no point, even when they were undefeated, rolling through the non-conference schedule, had a quad 1 win, were just rolling through. No point did they cross the top 50, which would suggest they're not an NCAA tournament team. But the resume says, yeah, they're definitely an NCAA tournament team. The eye test says maybe they're not like the most talented, but they get the results. Chris Beard has gotten the most out of that team. I don't think there's any question about that. So what do you do with them? I have them on the bubble, and it's kind of like a week-to-week thing. If they go in and they beat Kentucky, they beat Missouri over the next week, yeah, they're gonna climb up. And then the next week, if they lose to Mississippi State and South Carolina again, they'll drop right back down into that last 4 in. It's gonna be close, I think, for this Ole Miss team, and their fans are going to have some frustration with it. I can tell you right now, because they're going to look at that record and they're going to say, our record is so much better than the teams around us. I mean, in some cases, 5 less losses. I mean, that's double the amount of losses for teams around them. And they're going to raise up their shoulders and they're going to say, what are we supposed to do? We won all our games, but the computer numbers weren't there. The eye test didn't say that you were some juggernaut. So it'll be interesting to see all of these SEC teams. What is the final count on SEC teams in the NCAA tournament? Because I think that after that, there is quite a bit of drop-off. I think Georgia is probably the next team, and they're not even in the work to do category here. I don't think they can reach the NCAA tournament unless they win the SEC tournament. I think that's their only path. So when we come back on the other side, we'll talk about 2 teams that are not getting enough love from bracketologists right here on 3 True Values. Welcome back into 3 True Values as we are talking about 2 teams that are underrated by bracketologists. They're just too low. In my opinion, I think we need to talk about them. Why are they not getting the love that they deserve? First, we are going to start off 2 teams used to be in the same conference. Now they're in different conferences, but we're going to start with the one that's ranked higher in the net, and that is the BYU Cougars. BYU 8th in the net rankings, but I've seen several bracketologists put them as a 6 seed, which doesn't line up. You got number 8 in the net, but you're with teams ranked closer to 30. So what is happening there? Well, BYU 17-6 on the season, 3-5 in quad 1. So they've got 3 quad 1 wins, 2-1 in quad 2. That brings them to 5-6 overall in the first 2 quadrants and 12-0 in the bottom 2 quadrants. So no bad losses on the resume. Not a single bad loss for the Cougars. I mean, that's the kind of resume you would expect for the teams that are in the running for a 2 or a 3 seed. So what is it that's going on that's dropping them to 6? Is it the eye test? Because I'll admit the BYU team, it doesn't look like it just doesn't look like one of the top teams in the country, but they're getting the results. The computer numbers say that they're doing things the right way, that they're successful at it. So I guess eye test, it's got to play a major role in all of this. Keep in mind that eighth in the net, is the lowest they have been all season in the net ranking. So this is a team that the computers have loved from start to finish. Their strength of record is 27th in the country. Okay, so a little bit lower. But they're 12-2 at home, 2-4 on the road, undefeated in neutral site games, which brings them to 5-4 overall away from home. So a winning record away from home. We talk about their quad 1 resume. They've got a win over San Diego State in quad 1. They've got wins over UCF, not the strongest quad 1 win, but it's a quad 1 win. They've got a win against Iowa State in quad 1 as well. You look at their losses and really, I mean, on the road against Oklahoma, on the road against Texas Tech, on the road against Baylor, at home against Houston. Okay. It's Houston. They're number 1 in the net. What are you going to do? And then at home against Cincinnati, then a quad 1 loss at Utah. So, do they have the strongest resume in the world? No. But is it 6 seed material? I mean, we talk about the 6 seeds. We're talking about your Indiana States. You're talking about Kentucky, who is skidding back the wrong direction. They've got bad losses on their resume. So why is this BYU team closer to that conversation than the conversation for a 2 seed? I think it's a little bit a combination here. I think we've got what was a team that did not come into the season with these high expectations. BYU was entering the Big 12. The thought was they might struggle against this high level of competition. They really haven't. They've been good. They've held their own in the Big 12 so far. They haven't dominated though. Like Houston has dominated. They've got the loss to Kansas was not what they were hoping for, but it was on the road against Kansas. You can kind of give them that one. So if you're BYU, you look at what you've been able to do, and maybe there's some of that. We just don't think they're that good because we didn't think they were that good. That's potentially the case. You've also got to wonder the eye test. We talked about the eye test just a little bit, but the eye test, what does the eye test say about BYU? Well, it doesn't say that they're this big, explosive offensive juggernaut. It doesn't say that they're a bunch of defensive stoppers who are just not going to let you get past 50 points. It just says that they're a well-rounded, good team. That they just find a way to win their matchups. And so I think that's coming into play here. And it's interesting to see because you would think, okay, team in the Big 12, the strongest conference in college basketball this season, good computer numbers. They have some good wins on their resume. Why are they not further up in this conversation? Why are we not talking about BYU in a better light? I have them as a 3 seed right now. As I've said, I have to update some of the numbers here in a couple days. We will have the latest edition on Thursday for On 3, Thursday night, so Friday morning, probably when you're going to find it on your feed. And we will be upping that from once a week to 2 times a week here in the next week or so. So be on the lookout. You'll get a little bit fresher look at what Bracketology is looking like over the next few weeks. And then we'll ramp it up even more as the bubble shrinks and we start really getting into who's seated where, who's matching up with who in March. But back to the point here, I really don't know what BYU has to do, because the rest of the way, they've got opportunities against Baylor, Kansas, and Iowa State. If those three don't get it done for them, if they win those games and they're not a 2 seed, at least a 2 seed, I don't know what they're supposed to do. But it also seems like a big jump to take them from 6 all the way up to 2 because they go on a good stretch over the rest of the season. We'll see how it plays out. I think that BYU could be one of the most underseeded teams in the NCAA tournament, right alongside this other team that we're now going to discuss. We're going to talk about their resume. I've seen them. Now, look, I put them on the bubble not too long ago because their net ranking was hovering around the 50s. They had no quad 1 wins. They really did not look to have a lot of winnable opportunities left on the schedule that would build the resume. But then they went out and they changed that. 17-6 Gonzaga. They're 1-5 in quad 1, 2-1 in quad 2, undefeated outside of the first 2 quadrants. Now, undefeated out of the first 2 quadrants, that is again what we are looking for these bubble teams. If you can avoid the bad losses, you're going to have a much better chance to get into the field. But this Gonzaga team, still seen from some bracketologists, they're outside the field. They're in the first 4 out. Well, let me just tell you that Gonzaga, while a few weeks ago, yes, they were ranked in the 50s in the net. It was concerning. They had dropped. We had our worries. That's not the case anymore. Gonzaga ranks 24th in the net. I will say this right now, if the NCAA tournament selection committee leaves out the team which is ranked 24th in the net from the NCAA tournament, I will be shocked. It just isn't going to happen. We've got to fill out 68 teams. We've got 36 after the automatic qualifiers. So say St. Mary's, who has been the best team in that conference, say they win the conference title. All right, so they're looking for an at-large team. You're telling me you think there are 36 other teams, excluding the conference champions, who will get in ahead of the 24th ranked. So again, we've got at least 36 other teams here. They're ranked 24th. That gives them cushion even if there's no repeat members. So what are we doing? How are they not going to make the field? They got the quad 1-1 that they need, win that they needed. They beat Kentucky in Rupp Arena. I mean, that's a pretty good quad 1 win to have. I know Kentucky's not what they are, but a win at Rupp Arena to go along with being that high up in the rankings, and you still have more opportunities coming up this season. You still play St. Mary's. That's going to be quad 1 no matter where you play it. You play them at least one more time, possibly a second time in the conference tournament. You've also got San Francisco on the road, which is another quad 1 opportunity because they're in the top 75 of the net. You've got 2 more quad 1 opportunities. You telling me that a team in Gonzaga, which has not taken any bad losses. You look at their losses. St. Mary's. Okay. At Santa Clara, that one is the worst loss that they have probably. But then you look, quad 1 loss to Purdue, quad 1 loss at Washington. That one not the highest quality of quad 1 loss, but still a quad 1 loss. Quad 1 loss against UConn. Quad 1 loss against San Diego State. I mean, really. I know that they don't have a ton of big wins, but the computer numbers say that they are in the field with room to spare. And now the resume says that they are in the mix with all of those other teams that are in the field. And they have opportunities to build on that and get even stronger. So what are we talking about? How are they not going to make the tournament? with this resume. Now, if they drop games in quad 3 and quad 4 coming up over the next couple of weeks, yeah, that changes the conversation. If they lose both of these quad 1 opportunities, yeah, that changes the conversation. But right now, today, they have an NCAA tournament resume. I'm a little bit just baffled by the fact that people have them outside the field with the resume that they have. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, we're talking about some of these other teams that are on the bubble, and I would take Gonzaga 10 times out of 10 against some of these teams. I think it's just not that close for me with Gonzaga at this point. I know it was a big headline earlier. Will Gonzaga miss the NCAA tournament because they didn't have the resume? Well, now they've strung together some wins, and they've done enough in my mind to get into the field and to have a shot to hold on to it. When we come back on the other side, we will get you the games of the week and get you out of here. You're listening to 3 True Values. Welcome back to 3 True Values. We get you out of here with the games of the week tonight. That's Tuesday night. We're going to head to the Big Ten, where we've got an interesting matchup. Wisconsin, I mean, they had flown up the board. They were a 2 seed, looking like they could climb all the way to 1. No, never mind. They've lost 4 in a row. They got to get off that skid against Ohio State. Ohio State desperately in need of a win to try to keep their NCAA tournament hopes alive. So something's got to give there. I think we're really looking at like an eliminator type situation for Ohio State. For Wisconsin, it's not going to eliminate them. It will eliminate them from like contention for a high seed, though. Like, you can't lose 5 in a row. You just can't at any point in the season. There are teams. I mean, we just talked about a team in Ole Miss who looks like they're right on the edge of the bubble with 5 losses all season. So you can't lose 5 in a row if you're Wisconsin. On Wednesday, we got South Carolina at Auburn. That one's going to be a really good one. 2 top 15 teams really looking to cement their position in the SEC regular season title race. Then on Thursday, we are going with Purdue against, wait for it, Minnesota. Minnesota has pulled off a few upset wins over the past couple of weeks. They knock off Northwestern. They knock off Michigan State. They beat Penn State. They played Wisconsin within 2 points. This is a team that they found something. I know that Ben Johnson there was on the hot seat. There were a lot of concerns about the future of that program, but they are playing their best basketball of the season right now. They'll play against Purdue and look to shock everyone on Thursday. Then on Friday, we don't have any ranked matchups, but we do have basketball being played, and we've got Cornell against Harvard. Cornell right now leading the Ivy League. They have looked really good to this point in the season. Then on Saturday, we've got, a loaded slate of games. You can't go wrong with any of these, but the one that I think we have to go to is number 1 UConn against number 4 Marquette. That's the biggest game in the Big East this season. A real showdown between 2 teams that are looking to be a number 1 seed. UConn looking to defend their title. So you will not want to miss that one. Then on Sunday, we've got FAU playing against South Florida. Who would have thought that the Bulls would be number 1 in the American at this point in the season? That's right. The Bulls 17-5 and in the lead in the conference ahead of teams like FAU, Memphis, North Texas, SMU. They are legit. So check them out against FAU. Can they pick up that big win and maybe kind of turn into a bid stealer on our radar? Then on Monday, we will wrap this up with Houston and Iowa State. Houston and Iowa State, another big marquee showdown, a top 10 matchup in the Big 12. Seems like we have multiple of those just about every week at this point with how loaded that conference is. We'll be back next week to take you through all things college basketball, everything that's happened. We'll break it down right here on 3 True Values. I'm your host, James Fletcher. Thanks for tuning in.